What up, everybody? How you doing? Happy St. Patrick's Day edition. Of course, we're all Italian, but everybody's Irish today. So happy St. Patty's Day out there, the St. Patrick's Day edition of Giants Collective. Joined by Chris and Anthony today. Adriana had an event to go to, so she will not be joining us. So it's just the boys' night out tonight. If you're tuning in and haven't done so already, you could hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It'll be great. We're at 7430, so we are climbing all the time. We're getting close to
7530. Wow. I didn't realize we had that many subscribers.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Close to 7,500. So that is awesome. We appreciate all the continued support. You can check us out on TikTok and Instagram. You can also check us out on Twitter, which is @GiantsHMA. And of course, wherever you get your podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon, and of course, Apple. If you listen to us on Apple, can leave a 5-star review. That helps. I know I ask for a lot, but I promise you, none of that costs you any money. So it's just, you just do it and forget about it. Really quickly, the draft is about 5 weeks away. So we're kind of in limbo right now with things going on. A lot of the moves have already been made, and now they're just kind of filling out the roster. We're going to start it off with our right guard competition. Doesn't really look solid on paper. They brought back Evan Neal. They brought back Josh Ozuna, and Aaron Stinney is the other one. There's no Greg Van Roten. They didn't bring in anybody else to, at the moment anyway, to battle for this right guard position. Anthony, do you have any concerns with what they're doing at right guard? Do you think it'll all come out in the wash?
I mean, I do have my concerns. You know, I said it on our last show that the Giants are waiting out the market and being patient. It's what they did last year. It landed them Greg Van Roten in the summer. And I think they're going to do something similar this time around. Now, I think it's a risky strategy, though. There's definitely concern involved when the team is going to play the waiting game, because if you're not attacking, well, then you're vulnerable to being attacked. The market just got attacked. Wyatt Teller just got signed by the Houston Texans. Speaking of which, Houston Texans overnight just flipped that offensive line, made it so much better. They made some trades, but honestly, that team looks a lot better on paper than they did last year, especially with getting Tank Dell back. But off topic, I think that the Giants are just going to wind up re-signing Greg Van Roten to a 1-year deal in the summer like they did last year, and he's going to compete with these other guys, and he's going to win. And is that exactly the move that we wanted to see them make? No. But at the end of the day, Greg Van Roten's still a pretty good player, and the drop-off and the regression point for offensive linemen is not nearly as severe as it is for other guys. So it's an older offensive line that the Giants are going to roll with John Runyon, Jermaine Illuminor, and Greg Van Roten. Van Roten, of course, being almost 40, 36 years old. So I think that you're getting to a point here at this Giants team where they're running out of money. The market is too expensive. So they're just going to have to take the bargain option and move with it. It's risky. I'm definitely concerned about it. But what really is their other option at this point? I'm not entirely sure.
Chris, what do you think? What are your concerns about the right guard position?
I mean, I'm always concerned with the Giants offensive line until such time I see that we're consistently one of the top 5, 6, 7 units in the league. But I mean, last year, of course, a huge improvement. And I think the plan is kind of like what we talked about last show, that the Giants are going to try to bring back continuity. They're going to try to bring back the same line they had last year. Like Anthony said, I fully expect GVR to be signed by this team unless he decides to retire. But from at least what I've read on Twitter, it sounds like he'd be interested in potentially reuniting with the Giants. So I think they'll bring him back. And to add to what Anthony said, I expect the Giants to draft a guard too. I don't necessarily think it'll be in the first round, but I think they'll take one maybe in the second round, or maybe trade back and get a 3rd round pick. But I expect the Giants to add a guard in the draft as well. But GVR more than likely will be the day one starter. And they'll come back with the same line they had last year too. The guys that they brought back, I mean, there's a very good chance that none of those guys make the opening day roster. Those aren't guaranteed contracts. Azudu's interesting. Maybe with an improved coaching staff, maybe he could turn into a good depth player. I don't ever expect him to be a starter, but maybe he could improve. I've lost all hope on Evan Neal. I hope he proves me wrong and he turns out to be a tremendous guard, and maybe he will. I doubt it, but I hope that's the case. But I don't think it's a finished product. I think, like Anthony said, we had GVR, and we probably draft a guard at some point in this year's draft relatively early.
That was going to be another question I had was, did you think they were going to draft one? Yeah, man, I don't know. The Giants had a lot of other positions to fill. It's tough. We've talked about this before. You have a limited amount of cap room. And there's a lot of things you have to address. Their secondary was definitely weak, and still there's some question marks. They feel like the guys that brought in were good additions on 1-year deals. And Washington is a guy I know Anthony's really high on him. And a lot of people said that was a really good move by the Giants because he was a really good player before he got injured. And same thing with Greg Newsom's got a lot of talent, and he's kind of on a prove-it year. And a lot of times these guys come in on these prove-it years, and it's like, when you get to your free agent year, which is pretty much what it is. These guys are going to want to ball out because they're going to want to get paid. So a lot of times these are very low risk, high reward type of players. But again, it's maybe a future, maybe not. There's still a big question mark there. Obviously, our wide receiver room, we're going to talk about that because we did add a couple of wide receivers, but that's another one going into the year that was kind of questionable. We got Illuminar back. That was a big deal because the right side of our line going into the year was very questionable, but at least he's an anchor. We know what we're getting with Jermaine Illuminar. Our defensive tackle position has not been upgraded whatsoever, and we struggled up front. So that's another one that they have to address. So there are things that they have to address, but you can only do so much at a time. And I know as Giants fans, we're sick and tired of losing, and it's been a long time, and we want everything to be fixed overnight. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, but you can see with the moves that Harbaugh made, he's been, fiscally responsible here. And I feel like Dawn Aponte has a lot to do with that. Anthony's mentioned they didn't overreach. They haven't panicked. It is a little risky playing the waiting game, but because they're not overreaching and spending a ton of money like they did on Holland and Adebo last year, they put themselves in a better situation going forward. I don't think anybody expects us to win the Super Bowl this year, but if you can become a better team and build a better core of young players and you can win 7, 8, 9 games, and you see them going in this direction with a lot of cap space to go into next year and a lot of these guys coming off the books, and maybe if Newsom has a great year, Washington has a great year, you bring him back. But you're going to have a lot more cap space and flexibility. You're also going to have a lot more draft picks next year, I would imagine, depending on what they do, because we don't have a 3rd-round pick. That was well worth it, though, because we got Jackson Dart. And, I mean, again, I like what Harbaugh's done, and I understand the concern about certain positions, but there's only so much you can do. I feel like they've done a good job with what they had to work with. And, again, I'm going to believe in these guys. I'm going to believe in Harbaugh. I'm going to believe in Aponte. I'm going to believe in the coaching staff until they give me a reason not to. I've mentioned this before. When it comes to John Harbaugh, it's not like this is a guy that's never been a head coach. So I'm going to trust his view. I'm going to trust what he sees in the talent. Maybe Evan Neal does have something that he sees. And again, he might not make the roster. It's not like it costs us any money. So, again, that's low risk, high reward. If he ends up being just a serviceable guard, that would be great. So I don't know, man. It's, a lot to do, but I feel like they're moving in the right direction without question.
I agree. I think they had a good offseason.
Yeah. So, I'll tell you what. So there obviously was a big trade today.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that I wanted the Giants to draft years ago. I wish we would have pulled the trigger on this guy because he's just a fucking stud.
He's also got the best touchdown dance in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, well, he's the Penguin. What'd you guys think about the Jalen Waddle trade to Denver?
Yeah, I think we talked about this maybe like a couple of months ago where I think somebody donated or said a comment in the chat where they brought up the possibility, do you think the Giants could trade for Waddle? And I think I remember saying that's like one of the rumors that I actually could see happening. And I'm not surprised that he was traded. I know I kind of wish he was a Giant like you, Baddog. We both were monster fans of him in that draft class. So, yeah, he's super talented. I imagine him opposite of Malik Neighbors, and that's exciting. But I think the trade makes a whole lot of sense for both teams. I think the Dolphins view themselves as a team that's kind of in rebuild mode, probably tanking if we're being honest, looking for a quarterback next year, accumulating future draft capital. And the Denver Broncos, you already had a pretty good receiving core there for Bo Nix. Now you had a guy like Jalen Waddle to it. Suddenly they may be, if not the favorite, among certainly one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl next year. So I think it was a really good – it was one of those trades where you could really say that was a deal that made a lot of sense for both teams. From a Giants perspective, like we talked about Bad Dog before we went live, the draft compensation is at least relatively similar to what the Giants' second-round pick would have been this year, right? Because it was the 30th overall pick. I think they gave up a third and maybe they swapped fourths or maybe they swapped thirds. I can't recall. But yeah, they seem to give up a lot. If the Giants could have done a similar deal, maybe with their second this year or future second, I wouldn't have been opposed to that. But I think the Giants, as we've talked about, have a plan. I think they're trying to build their team run-first approach, and I think they'll look to draft their wide receiver, if not this year, certainly early next year, to be that 1A, and I just don't think it's the time for it yet.
Anthony, what'd you think about the deal?
I thought it was a good deal for both teams. I think that the Miami Dolphins are a really terrible football team, and they're going to lose a lot of games this year, and I think that they're tanking, and I really think that's what's going on. They're trying to rebuild and tear down that roster. Clearly, a new general manager is stepping in and saying, this is not my roster, and I'm going to make it mine. So I'm going to bring in my quarterback that I had over in Green Bay. I'm going to make him the starting quarterback and overpay him egregiously. That's what the Dolphins did. I'm going to go ahead and trade away all the stars, and I'm going to bring in new guys and load up on draft picks. Now they've got 2 first-round picks this year. I'm sure that they're going to find a way to get an extra pick in next year's draft. They're going to be picking high because the team is really bad, and they're going to get a quarterback next year, and they're going to relaunch and reboot a brand new Miami Dolphins team. They'll probably even bring new uniforms in to go along with it like other teams do, just to kick off a new era. So that's what I think the Dolphins are doing. But then from the perspective of the Denver Broncos, that team was better weather away from going to the Super Bowl. That's it.
And Bo Nick's playing.
They didn't need to do a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly. They didn't need to do a lot to change that team. They just needed another piece here or there. So they didn't really do much in free agency, but they didn't lose a lot of guys either. They cut Dre Greenlaw because, they didn't think he was up to snuff anymore, but they didn't lose any major people or players for their team. And then they add Jalen Waddle now to the mix to pair up with RJ Harvey entering his next season. And you've got Cortland Sutton still on that team. I mean, they're a legit Super Bowl contender. They were this past year. They proved that by going to the conference championship game. And now I think they're going to be gunning for the Super Bowl once again. So I think it's a great trade for both teams again. I think the Dolphins got plenty of value out of Jalen Waddle, and they're clearly tanking. So they don't care that the team is going to suck. They want the team to suck. So both teams will benefit. Should the Giants have made that trade, if you want to tie it into a Giants conversation? No. The Giants only have 1 day 2 pick. They can't afford to send a second-round pick for a wide receiver. That's just the reality of it. You send a second-round pick for a wide receiver like Waddle, now you're dealing with his cap hits. You send a second-round pick even for a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., well, you've only got a couple of years of cost control on his rookie contract. The Giants need 4 years of cost control on somebody with that second-round pick, and that's why I don't see them trading it for a player. Trading down in the second round to get another third-round pick, that's more probable than trading it for a playmaker. As badly as I want an elite playmaker, I actually like what the Giants did with their wide receiver core over the last week or so with some of these extra additions like Darnell Mooney. So we'll see what it looks like by the end of the draft. I think they'll add another playmaker at some point, but I don't think that they're a team positioned to be trading a second-round pick.
So obviously he was a big deal, and I'm kind of happy about that he went to Denver because he's going to be one of my keepers. This is actually both of the keepers in my fantasy team. And again, I started off 13-0, and I lost the last week because Jalen Hurts was terrible. And then I lost the first playoff week, even though I had a bye because I lost Daniel Jones and I had to play Kirk Cousins and Devonta Adams got hurt, and that just sucked. But Waddle and ATN are going to be 2 guys that I
he moved teams too, ETN. Yeah.
They're very low picks for me next year. So, like, I only lose an 11th round pick and a 9th round pick for those 2 guys. It's pretty good. AJ Brown's another one. Now, we have heard so many rumors about AJ Brown getting traded and all. I don't know how the Eagles do this shit. I don't understand how they're able to just – the cap doesn't seem to apply to them ever. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, never catches up with them. Like, they're talking about – trading AJ Brown, they'd get nailed with a massive cap hit, but it doesn't seem to bother them. There was talk about him going to the Patriots. That fell through. Is it possible that there is a team that ends up with AJ Brown? Because it doesn't seem like they'd have to give up much just to get him out of Philadelphia, which obviously he doesn't like Jalen Hurts. There's a lot of crap going on there, kind of like kind of like Owens had with McNabb, and then Owens had with Romo, I guess. Can you see a team giving up he's probably a 4th round pick is my guess, a 3rd or a 4th round pick. Do you see any team getting ready to make that move? Is there a team that can afford them?
To your point about, first off, Anthony, I just what you had me thinking when you brought up the new uniform. It is very rare, and I was just thinking about this as you were talking. It is very rare that I like a new uniform in the NFL. I really like the new Titans uniform. I actually think it looks really cool. They showed the picture of that last week, so I was actually a big fan of that uniform. As far as the question about AJ Brown, I mean, yeah, I would think. I mean, if you're talking about a price tag like that, sure, I think a team would be potentially interested in them. And to your point about the Eagles and how they always seem to be able to avoid all the salary cap problems, I think the reason for that is because they draft well. When you draft well, like Anthony said earlier, and you can bring guys in at a very cost-effective rate, you could afford to sign a couple of deals that may not be in the team's best interest, like the Saquon Barkley deal looks like right now, off the year he was coming off of, the void years for Jalen Hurts. We'll see how that contract plays out. But at the end of the day, the cure to that, and all NFL fans know, the way that you win Super Bowls is in the draft. If you draft as well as the Eagles have in recent years with Howie Roseman, you could tend to make a few mistakes in terms of contract extensions.
I think AJ Brown's going anywhere.
I don't.
No.
I think in the end he'll probably stay with the Eagles. But it wouldn't shock me. Like, that's one of those deals where he clearly didn't seem to be happy there last year with the Eagles. It seems like the Eagles are on at least an even keel trajectory, potentially a downward trajectory. Jalen Hurts isn't the most appealing quarterback to play with, so I wouldn't be stunned if they trade him, but I doubt it. I don't think the Eagles trade him.
Who could use a guy like AJ Brown?
A lot of teams could use AJ Brown.
No, I'm thinking like who's close that kind of needs.
The Patriots are the obvious team that come to mind, but they've tried to get AJ Brown. They haven't had any success just yet. So I think they're moving off of that.
Or do you think?
Yeah, I saw that Rams rumor. The Rams were thinking of moving on from Devontae Adams for AJ Brown, but the way that I understand it is that was based on a salary bonus that Devontae Adams had due, and now they've paid it. So they're probably not interested in moving on from Devontae Adams now. I think that's what it was about.
Just wondering.
And again, I don't know any of these teams' salary cap situations, but
me neither.
How about the Packers? That's a team that I think could use an elite wide receiver. I think a team like that, he could be a good fit. A team that's looking to compete to win a Super Bowl.
Would they trade him at the end of the NFC? Like, what about the Panthers?
Yeah, possible.
I would love to see him on Baltimore, but I don't think anybody's going to be trading a superstar to Baltimore right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The Cosby ordeal.
How about the
Baltimore makes a lot of sense.
Are the Chargers?
Oh boy! Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah,
that'd be fun to see.
Yeah, and you're bringing up the Broncos. I think the two best teams in the AFC next year are the Chargers and Broncos going into the year.
Yeah. Mike McDaniel was a great hire for them.
Yeah.
You always like the Chargers.
Well, I mean, they got Slater and they got their two left in the back, Walton Slater. So yeah, I'm a big Chargers guy next year.
We gotta do that with our team, without question. So this isn't really in the thing, but I wanted to talk about this because this seems to be getting more and more leverage when it comes to the number 5 overall pick, and that's Jeremiah Love. This seems to be, maybe it's just smoke. You never know, man. You always hear all these rumors and all the smoke, and it's, you know how the draft goes. There's always a guy that jumps way up the board. There's always a guy that falls way down the board. It seems like Caleb Downs is going to be the guy that falls way down this year because I haven't heard anything about him anymore.
The injury stuff, I think.
Knee problem, right? So there's always something pops up. So you never know, but this seems to be getting more and more momentum. Is it possible that the Giants do spend the number 5 overall pick on Jeremiah Love? And how would you feel about it if they did?
I think it's very possible. I just don't think he's going to be there. I think the Titans are going to take him at 4. But I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and I get it. They play the same position. But I think it's apples and oranges. Like, a lot of people have compared this to the Saquon Barkley pick on Twitter that are Giants fans. There's no way you could take a running back at number 5. I think every situation is different. When the Giants took Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall, they didn't have a quarterback of the future, right? They clearly needed a quarterback. Eli Manning was like almost 40 years old. It was a super rich quarterback draft class. And they had a pick where if they didn't want to take one of those quarterbacks, where they could have traded back and gotten a haul for that pick for a team that may have wanted to trade up for Darnold or Rosen or Allen or name the quarterback, right? It was a very rich quarterback draft class in terms of prospects coming in. This draft is not that situation. There's nobody that's dying to trade up to pick number 5 like they could have potentially been at pick number 2. And you have already a young quarterback in place. As we've talked about before, the best ingredient for a young quarterback is a strong run game. And if the Giants were to feel like Jeremiah Love could be of the likes of a Saquon Barkley in the situation the Giants are currently in, it makes a lot more sense than when they took Barkley in 2018. So I think it's a complete apples and orange situation when I see people compare that. I understand Barkley, running back, Giants drafted him. We all realize that was the wrong pick at that point in time. That doesn't mean that Love would be a horrible pick for the Giants at this point in time. all that being said, I don't think he'll be there. I think the Titans are going to take him at 4. That's everything that I've read in terms of the mocks. A lot of people feel like they're going to take him with that pick. But I absolutely think if he's there, I'm going to tell you right now, if he's there at 5, I expect the Giants to take him. I think he will be a Giant if he's there at 5, but I don't think he'll be there.
What do you think, Anthony?
I don't think it's completely different from the Saquon Barkley situation. It's like you say, apples and oranges, and in many ways it is, but in many ways it isn't, because I still go back to the positional market value thing. I think
Anthony, I know where you're going to go with this, and I think it's a fair argument. I just want to add to that. That's fair, but the players that I see being argued are other positions that traditionally wouldn't be viewed as premium positions, whether it be the safety downs, the inside linebacker with Styles. Those are guys that don't really get big contracts either, those positions.
Yeah, but that's not entirely true, because there are players like Fred Warner makes $20 million a year. If you think that Sonny Styles is going to be a Fred Warner level player,
fair,
I mean, that's double the value. So you're doubling your value with, Jeremiah Love making $9 million a year at the 5th overall pick. He's already a top 10 highest paid running back in the NFL. So, I mean, is $9 million highest paid at linebacker as well? I mean, I've made that argument against Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs as well. And this is when I have this conversation against all 3 of those guys. I say, listen, if you think one of them is going to wear a gold jacket, you say F the positional value and you just take them. That's it. That's really what it comes down to. But for running backs in particular, obviously they always become the hot subject of debate here, especially because the Giants famously took Barkley at number 2. And I still think there is overlap from that situation to this one because of the positional value argument. But I will say this, a lot of fans seem to have this narrative going that this is not a year where the Giants are going to be able to trade down, that there's not going to be any interest, that the Giants won't get a haul for the number 5 overall pick. I don't agree. Somebody is going to want to trade up for one of those pass rushers. There are 2 positions in the NFL draft that teams like to trade up for. Yes, quarterbacks. If it's a quarterback-rich draft, you're very likely to find a trade partner, somebody who wants to move up for a quarterback. It's not a quarterback-rich draft, but it's a pass rusher-rich draft. And a lot of teams love to trade up for those pass rushers, and they give a shit ton to move up for those pass rushers. Look at what the Falcons gave up last year to move up to the Los Angeles Rams and take James Pierce Jr. And this happens every year. It even happened last year, not for a pass rusher, but for Travis Hunter. So I think that the notion that teams aren't going to trade up because there is no quarterback on the board is false. The Browns found a way to trade down last year with the Jaguars to move off of Travis Hunter and get that extra first-round pick. The Falcons found a way, or the Rams found a way to move down and get that extra first-round pick with a pass rusher on the board. And I feel like it happens quite often that teams trade up and give up future first-round picks, or at least big-time hauls for pass rushers. So I do think that the New York Giants at 5 overall, a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, who just lost Trey Hendrickson, they don't have any pass rushers. They desperately need one. Why wouldn't they give a future first-round pick to move up 5 spots, get a Reuben Bain Jr., a David Bailey, or an Arvell Reese, and give that elite defensive playmaker to a defense that has failed Joe Burrow every single season? That's the argument that you make if you're the Giants to the team calling.
That's the one scenario, Anthony, where I could see the Giants being an appealing destination for somebody to trade up. Now, I think these teams have to feel that those edge rushers are elite prospects to be able to get, and they very well may, to be willing to get the conversation you're talking about.
Arvell Reese usually goes number 2 in these mock drafts, but every now and then he gets by number 2, and then he just falls to 5 where the New York Giants are. If he's on the board at 5, somebody's going to say, okay, this kid literally has Micah Parsons upside. Why wouldn't we trade up and try and get him? And I think David Bailey as well. He goes top 3 in a lot of mocks, but one of David Bailey, Reuben Bain, or Arvell Reese is going to be on the board for the New York Giants at 5. And all 3 of those guys consistently get mocked 2, 3. They get mocked in that group, but one of them is going to fall to the Giants most likely. I highly doubt it goes edge rusher after Mendoza. So I think that the Giants are going to have a chance to trade down because they don't need a pass rusher. They've got Brian Burns. They've got Abdul Carter. As of today, they still have Kayvon Thibodeau. So they really don't need to be drafting an edge rusher at 5, but somebody really wants one. I think they'll get some trade offers.
And I'm not against the idea of trading down. As a matter of fact, I think it's probably the ideal scenario for the Giants if it's the right deal and they get fair draft compensation. But I guess my brain, the way I'm thinking is, you have a general manager who's on the last year of his contract. We could all make our arguments that Dona Ponte and Harbaugh has a lot to say with the building of the team. At the end of the day, Joe Schoen's on the last year of his contract. Like, I think he has to be blown away to trade down with the 5th overall pick. We also have a head coach with John Harbaugh, who's 64, 65 years old. If he feels there's, like you said, Anthony, a potential gold jacket player at 5, which he very well may, I don't think he wants to trade down. I think he's trying to win immediately. And you also have Jackson Dart in that rookie window, and you want to try to capitalize on that as soon as you possibly can. So that's why I think all signs point to, unless the Giants are blown away with a trade offer, that they don't trade down.
Yeah, but that's just kind of where I was going with it. Is a lot of fans think they're just going to pick at 5 because nobody's going to blow them away with a trade offer, and I'm saying, it's possible. It's totally possible because of the pass rusher equation. This is a pass rusher rich draft, but it's really rich at the top, and then there's more guys who are going to be day 2. It's not a lot of late first round guys, but there are a lot of guys at the top, so the Giants could potentially take advantage and move down from 5. But ultimately, if I had to give you my prediction, I don't think it's going to be Jeremiah Love. I don't think it's smoke either. I think what people are doing is connecting. I don't think the Giants are even close to making their decision on who they want to take number 5. They've only had a couple guys in for visits. Obviously, Jeremiah Love was one of them, so he is in contention for the pick because the Giants pretty much exclusively draft players that they have in for 30 visits. They only draft the guys that they meet with. At least that's been the trend under Joe Schoen. So he definitely is in contention for the pick. But that being said, I think that while John Harbaugh cares a lot about getting just talent and collecting talent and doesn't seem to care a ton about positional value, he also doesn't always subscribe to that belief because he is the most analytically driven coach in the NFL and decision maker. And I think that analytics play a part when you're taking a running back at number 5 overall, even a linebacker, a safety. So I actually think if I had to predict what John Harbaugh wants to do, I think that he probably wants to trade down because of the analytics and the data that would tell you with those positions on the board being your top players, you should trade down. So I'm trying to think from Harbaugh's perspective. I think he wants to trade down from an analytical sense. But at the end of the day, yeah, there's some serious talent on the board. You could make the argument for any of those 3 guys going on and being multi-year All-Pros. And if you really think that's what they're going to be, then you just take one of them at 5 and you walk away from the night 1 of the draft really happy.
Yeah, and I think it was Dan Schneer I saw on Twitter, who I like. But I saw him throw out the perspective of, if you were Joe Schoen, knowing that it may be in the best interest of your team to trade down because of where they are on the board at number 5 overall, would you even potentially look to trade down for less than what is deemed appropriate value on the draft chart, so you could still trade back to, say, 8 or 9 and pick a guard and maybe get 2 third-round picks? There's no way in hell Joe Schoen's doing that, in my opinion. Last year in his deal, he's not going to go out by making a deal that is less than what that pick is worth to trade down. He's just not going to do it.
So the thing with the last year of the deal is those deals expire right after the NFL draft. So he is going into the last year of his deal, but that last year starts as soon as the draft ends. And the only way he's going to see out that final year is if he does well in the draft and proves that he's committed to the team.
And I agree with that. I agree with that, Anthony. But wouldn't it be a higher probability he would do better in this year's draft specifically if he just stayed at 5 and took a player?
No, because I don't think that they're going to let him. They're not going to let him play out the year. They're going to make the decision on his contract and whether or not he's the general manager for 2020. He's not the general manager in my mind for the 2026 season. He's the 2026 offseason general manager. Yeah. He has to get through the draft. And if the Giants, for whatever reason, are unpleased with the draft process, if him and Joe Schoen butt heads a ton, there is an outside chance he's fired before the regular season begins. That's possible because that's how these things usually go with the general managers. They get fired after the cycle, and the cycle ends after the NFL draft. That's happened in the NFL before, where a GM gets through the offseason and then doesn't make it to the regular season, and they go on a long search for a general manager.
I would hate that if the Giants did that. I'm not against getting rid of Schoen at the end of this year, but I want to see
he's not going to play out his contract. That doesn't happen. They either extend him or they move on from him. So, but I think the likely scenario is they give him a 1-year deal and then they.
I agree. I think they'll get some kind of small extension.
But he's just not going to play at the end of his year. Like we saw Mike McCarthy, for example. Mike McCarthy played out the end of his year of his contract, but that was like a complete statistical anomaly. That hasn't happened in forever, where a head coach has just gone into free agency, and it was considered terrible business by the Dallas Cowboys to allow that to happen because teams have pretty much a handshake agreement that you don't allow that to happen. You give them an extension, at least if it's 1 year. So you're more in the NFL, you're more likely to get fired before the final year of your deal if you're a general manager or a head coach than you are to play it out.
Makes sense. Yeah.
If we do, say we do stick at 5, who do you guys want them to take?
Sonny Styles is who I want them to take.
Me too.
If they stay at 5. And like I said, I don't think we're drafting Love because I honestly think he's going 4 to Tennessee. I just think if he were there, I think it's very likely the Giants would take him. But yeah, Sonny Styles is the guy that I want. I think he's the potential gold jacket player. I understand that we drafted a linebacker. Signed a linebacker. But as I've said on this show in more recent weeks, look at our history of signing free agent linebackers. We get one really good year out of them, and then they kind of fall apart. Blake Martinez, Bobby Okereke. If you feel like you have a trend set, like Anthony said, if you feel like you have a potential Fred Warner at that position that you could just stick in there for the next 7, 8, 9 years, it could be that man in the middle behind what we think is this strong defensive line. I think that's very appealing. So for me, it's Sonny Styles. I think that's the pick that I want, and I think a lot of Giants fans want that pick.
Yeah,
who do you want?
If I'm picking there at 5, not trading down, it would be Sonny Styles. I think that there are strong arguments to make for the other guys. Jeremiah Love, you can make an argument if you're going best player available, whatever. But for me, the best player available would be Sonny Styles. I've watched a lot of his film, and I think that he is maybe the most talented player in the draft class. And so if you have an opportunity to get that guy at number 5, you take him. But I don't think he's going to be there at number 5, like you said, Chris. I think that he's going to go number 4 to Tennessee because of Robert Saleh. He's going to want that inside linebacker.
You think Styles goes 4 to I say Love goes 4 to Tennessee. You think Styles going 4 to Tennessee?
Yeah, no, I don't buy any of that. People are saying that Love is going to go 4 to Tennessee. I think Styles is going 4 to Tennessee. It's Robert Saleh's team, and
That's
Robert
fair.
Saleh loves a good inside linebacker. Fred Warner, he's coached forever. He coached Dre Greenlaw. He coached all those. Whether you think they were good or not at the Jets, he just kept investing in the inside linebackers when he was with the New York Jets. He is obsessed with that position. It's the linchpin piece of the solid defense that's had a lot of success.
I think there's arguments for both
New
players.
York, so.
I think you bring up very good points about Saleh's attachment to the linebacker for sure, defensive-minded coach. But I think you could also argue young quarterback Cam Ward, as I've said, best friend to a young quarterback is a great running back. So I could see both arguments there for the Titans with that pick.
The hell was I going to say here? Well, another thing. Oh, it's kind of out of not in the John Harbaugh playbook, but I know we've mentioned him before. Is Carnell Tate a possibility at number 5? I mean, we haven't really. I mean, yeah, we brought in Austin, we brought in Darnell Mooney, we have Darius Slayton. They brought in Isaiah Likely, obviously, even though he's listed as a tight end, but we also lost Wan'Dale Robinson. They brought back Gunner. But you look at that wide receiver room, there's no playmaker there outside of Malik Neighbors, and we don't know what he's going to be coming off an ACL. And you talk about a rookie quarterback, and, his friend obviously is a good running back. We have a pretty good combination. The Giants were one of the leading teams in rushing touchdowns this year. The line played a lot better. Obviously, the offensive line is a really good friend of the young quarterback. But how can you see John Harbaugh saying, let's get another stud wide receiver? Is Carnell Tate a possibility, or is that probably not going to happen?
Could I see it? Sure, I could see it, especially if the Giants were to trade down and to get into that 7, 8, 9 range and he was there. It's possible at 5 too. If they felt like he was an elite talent and a guy could potentially wear a gold jacket, possible. I personally don't think he's going to go that route. Just from the outside looking in, seeing how they've started to build this team, seeing the way that Harbaugh has traditionally built football teams, I think that they're gonna build the team differently than drafting a wide receiver at number 5 overall, especially having Malik Neighbors coming back. He's an elite talent there. They signed Likely. And as Anthony, I actually really like the Darnell Mooney signing. Now, I don't think Darnell Mooney's a long-term answer at all. He's 29 years old. But do I think he could give you similar production? Probably not quite as good as Wan'Dale Robinson. Yeah, I do, for a year, which is all the contract is under. And you plug him in for a year, and then you go and get your long-term receiver in next year's draft, or potentially in this year's draft, early day 2, if you want to take a wide receiver with that second round pick. But I'd be surprised, Bad Dog. I really would. I'd be surprised if they take a wide receiver there at 5, but I wouldn't rule it out. It's clearly a need, like you said.
I think that with the wide receiver position, there's two arguments that you can make. You can make the argument that that's the best position to draft at 5 because of the positional value. Like I was talking about, if you draft, Jeremiah Love at 5, he's already one of the highest paid running backs. But if you draft Cardell Tate, let's use him as an example at 5, he's not even close to being one of the highest paid wide receivers. So you're getting tremendous value regardless. So you can make that argument. But you could also make the argument of trading down if you want to take a wide receiver, because there's going to be a wide receiver wherever you trade down to. There's Cardell Tate in this draft. There's Mekhi Lemon in this draft. There's Jordan Tyson in this draft. So let's say you move down 5 to 10 spots. You're going to get one of those guys.
That is much more realistic. I agree with that.
Did I see Mekhi Lemon was brought in for a top 30 visit, or was I dreaming that? Did they bring him in for a top 30 visit?
I think I did. I think
he
I
did.
saw
Yeah,
that.
he did. 100%
Yeah.
he did.
Yeah.
So
here's what I'll say about the running back thing, Anthony, and I get it. Like if they were to draft him, he'd be a top 6 or 7 highest paid running back. My devil's advocate to that would be, for a position that traditionally breaks down at 26, 27, if you could get an elite talent at that position, like elite, like we're talking top 3 or 4 in the league, which if you don't feel Jeremiah Love could be that, there's no point in drafting him there. But if you feel he's an elite talent, my argument to that would be, now is the time to pay him when you could get the maximum out of that position. Running backs in elite talent usually has their best years early on in their career.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with that.
Right?
Their prime is their first contract. So that's a good argument to make, and that makes sense. And even the whole, like I said, if they want to take Jeremiah Love at 5 because they think he's going to wear a gold jacket, this is a draft to do it in, because the argument of playing the positional value and the market value thing is tough to do when you're deciding between a running back, linebacker, and safety. They're all devalued positions, and you said that earlier. So unless you're debating between Jeremiah Love and a cornerback like Mansour Delane or a wide receiver like Cardell Tate, that's when the positional and the market value of those contracts has to come into, has to factor in. But if it's Jeremiah Love, Caleb Downs, or Sonny Styles, if those are the 3 guys that you want, then just take the best guy on your board, whoever you think is the best of those 3, because either way, you're not playing the market or positional value game. So that's just the kind of funny part of this draft class. That's why it was a little bit different back in 2018 when they took Barkley, because Quentin Nelson was there. Well, they had a big trade down offer. There were quarterbacks on the board. So there were some different avenues that you could take to more maximize that second overall pick with the positional value. That's absolutely true. This year, the positional value, you're not going to maximize regardless at 5.
Yeah, and they were also, in 2018, they were kind of a team that was like in flux. They weren't a team that felt like they were on the ascension with a young quarterback that you were building for the next 3, 4, 5 years towards trying to maximize that Super Bowl window. Bringing in a guy like Jeremiah Love now, you could at least argue, could maximize that Super Bowl window for a guy like Jackson Dart over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. I think the biggest argument outside of what you just brought up and what I brought up earlier, the trade down avenue, potentially drafting a quarterback. When you brought in Barkley, there was no Super Bowl window. You had Eli Manning, who was 36, 37 years old. What were you maximizing there with that pick? So I just think it's completely different scenarios. And I understand the fears of taking Barkley. And I'm not necessarily saying, like I said, I prefer Styles. But I'm not against Jeremiah Love with that pick if they feel he's an elite talent, because I do think it makes a lot more sense to take a running back early in this year's draft as opposed to 2018.
I'm not completely against it, but I wouldn't love it. I'd be a lot more excited about Love than I would be, or I'm sorry, about Styles than I would be Love. Yeah. And I don't even know. I'd be a little bit conflicted about Caleb Downs at 5'2", to be honest, because safety.
The injury scare. Yeah.
The injury is in the back of your head. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. But the Giants know. So if they take him at 5, I guess you have to make the assumption that the injury thing isn't true. But even then, the thing with Caleb Downs is he's really freaking good at football, but he's also not an athletic or physical freak like those other top safeties in the NFL, like a Kyle Hamilton, who moves the way he does at 6'4", 6'5", whatever the hell he is. Caleb Downs is 6 foot, 190 pounds. Like, he's not an athletic anomaly. And I think when you're drafting at 5, you should be taking, yes, best players, but also the best athletes who have the longest career expectancy. And that's like where Sonny Styles kind of bucks the trend of not taking an inside linebacker at 5, because he might be the best pound for pound athlete in the entire draft class. Or you can make the argument for Jeremiah Love. One of those 2 guys is the best athlete in this class. I think you have to think about that. So that's where with Caleb Downs, I get a little 50-50 on whether or not I think
And when you think about it from an historical standpoint, I can't remember every name off the top of my head, but Jamal Adams, for example, I think he was a top 5 pick by the Jets. It's very rare that a safety taken that high in the draft is a guy that's, sees a second contract with the same team who drafted him. I don't love the idea of taking a safety there. And I love Caleb Downs, and I wouldn't be upset if we took him. But he, like you said, he also doesn't have the transcendent generational characteristics that you would think of, like this uber athletic safety, like a Kyle Hamilton, who actually went far later in that draft. I think he went 14th overall, but that was also a very strong draft class on the defensive side of the football.
The other thing with Jeremiah Love compared to Barkley is, again, I don't think our offensive line is great by any stretch of the imagination, but that 2017 offensive line was a total disaster. It was not set up for a running back. You really needed to build your line. That thing was falling apart. I mean, you had Eric Flowers as your left tackle, and he was, the only reason I remember him is because he was so bad. I probably couldn't even tell you anybody else on that line. It was so forgettable. They were not ready to take it. And again, I'm not saying that our line is fantastic by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a lot better, going into 2026 than it was going into 2018. Yeah. And again, it's weird because at first I was like dead set against Jeremiah Love, and I wouldn't be thrilled at the pick, but I don't think I'd be as aggravated with it as I would have been if you asked me this a month ago. And the reason being is they were in on Kenneth Walker, which obviously is telling you they were willing to pay $12 million or whatever it was. They didn't want to go 15, but they were probably willing to pay 10 to 12 million, which is what you're going to pay Jeremiah Love. Now, the difference is if you brought in Kenneth Walker, you have now plugged in the running back, and you can still go out there and get a Sonny Styles, and you would have filled both positions there. So I guess it just really depends on.
You could flip it though, Baddog, and I hate that I'm defending drafting running back, because I'm not. I'm more so just defending the idea that it's a ridiculous scenario for the Giants in this year's draft. But you could flip it and you could say, well, they signed Tremaine Edmonds instead of draft. You said you could have signed Walker and drafted at Sonny Styles. Well, you signed Tremaine Edmonds. That allows you to draft the right. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I think Sonny Styles probably gonna be better than Tremaine Edmonds.
He's gonna be.
You don't know. You don't know. We've seen Evan Neal. We've seen quarterback. Oh, this guy can't miss. This guy's generating. He sucks. Yeah. So it's really, there is no exact science when it comes to drafting. There just isn't. It depends
and like Anthony always says, I see a lot of people, and I get it, man. I see people in the chat saying we have 4 running backs right now. Do we have 4? I think we have 3, right? We have
Singletary, scouted.
Singletary.
He would be the 4th. But it's what Anthony said. I remember last year's draft, he was hammering home the point. You don't draft for need at the top of the draft. You draft for the guy that you feel like could be a Hall of Fame worthy player, and a guy that could make a huge difference for your team, not just for next year, but for the next 3 or 4 years. If you feel like Jeremiah Love, and I'm not saying they do or don't, I have no idea what the Giants feel. But if they feel Jeremiah Love is equivalent to a young Saquon Barkley in this situation, for all the reasons we've expressed, it's apples and oranges. It makes a lot more sense to do it now than we did back in 2018. That's all I'm saying.
And on that point, could you imagine if the Giants did draft for need last year with the number 3 overall pick? Who would they have taken? Would they have taken Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah, they would have.
They ended up taking Abdul Carter because he was the best player available. If they drafted for need, they would have taken either Shedeur, because that was the hot name going there at 3, or maybe they would have taken Dart at 3, which is fine, whatever. But then you don't have Abdul Carter, and we all would have.
They would have taken a quarterback.
Out if they would have freaked out. Yeah. And if it wasn't a quarterback, though, it would have been Will Campbell.
Yeah.
How did that work? Yeah. It would have been Will Campbell. That would have been terrible. Everybody would be upset right now if they took Will Campbell with the number 3 overall pick. So you don't draft for need. You draft best player available. It's what the Giants did last year. It's what they did the year before. It's why they got Malik Neighbors at number 6. They could have forced it on a J.J. McCarthy, who, yes, admittedly, I liked coming out of the NFL draft. If we had J.J. McCarthy right now, we would be back at square one. We would feel we had no future, because that's how the Minnesota Vikings feel. That's why they just signed Kyler Murray to a 1-year deal. So
no Dart.
Exactly. So you don't draft for need. You draft the BPA, and that's the argument that you're going to make when the Giants take a running back at 5 if they do this year. So,
right. Yeah. Well, like I said, it's going to be extremely interesting to see what they do, because there are going to be guys there that they do need positionally, inside linebacker, safety. you can argue they need a running back. I mean, people say we brought Singletary back, but Singletary might not make the team. They could cut him. It's not going to cost them anything to cut him. So if they draft Jeremiah Love, Singletary probably doesn't make the team. They just readjusted his contract to make salary cap room. Who else did they just do that to? Who did they just restructure? Burns, right? So they got like an extra $15 million, but they said don't expect them to throw it. That's for more operational costs going through the year, which is a lot better than we normally do, where we go with like $500,000 and we have to get rid of players. And I remember one week we didn't even field a full team. They had like 51 players or something because they couldn't afford 53. So again, that's just kind of for yearly costs, but they obviously have a little bit more. And again, it's not like you lose this cap. It's not like you only have it for this year. If you have extra money going into next year, it moves into next year's cap. So yeah. I like what the Giants have done with the cap this year. So I'm just anxious about the draft, man. I really want to know what the hell they're going to do. There's a lot of options there, but I'm just curious to see which direction Harbaugh wants to go. And
yeah, if you like you said, Baddog, about the need point, if you would think running back is like the 8th or 9th biggest need on this team when you think about a positional group. But if you're drafting a Jeremiah Love, you're like I said, you're drafting him because you feel he's that guy, right? He's that saying, and he's a weapon. I don't even want to use him as the term of a running back. He's a guy that you feel could transcend your offense, like Barkley was able to do with the Eagles when he had that surrounding cast for that 1 year. That's why you're drafting him that high if you draft him. If you don't feel that way, you're not drafting him. If you think he's a run-of-the-mill running back, you're not drafting him there.
Agreed. Well, listen, we have about 5 weeks to talk about the draft, and we'll obviously continue to talk about it. When we get into April, we'll probably do a few mock drafts just to see how things turn out and if we get close. Let's get to the chat real quick. By the way, if you guys are enjoying the show, if you could do us a favor and hit the thumbs up. We're at 159 right now. So that'd be great if we could get to 200. Don't forget to subscribe again. That doesn't cost anything to do that. We're closing in on 7,500 subscribers, which is awesome. So hopefully by the beginning of the year, we can be over 8,000. That'd be a nice, tidy number to start the season. And hopefully it's a great season for the Giants. Cruise on, thank you, buddy. He says, I would like Styles or Mansour Delane at 5 over Downs. Can Ruben Bain play defensive tackle? I believe he's already 270 pounds. Can he hold up against the run?
Bain could play on the interior for sure. I think he could be a 3-tech, but I don't think that's where he wants to play, and I don't think that's where he's going to be best. So, yes, he could theoretically, but he's not going to be what you're looking for from a defensive tackle. What the Giants are looking for from a defensive tackle is a run defender because they've got their pass rushers on the edge and they've got Dexter Lawrence as their interior rusher, from the zero. He's incredible at that. They need 2 guys that can just hold their own and anchor against the run at those 3-tech positions if they're running the 3-4. And Ruben Bain, he's an excellent run defender out on the edge, but that doesn't mean he's going to be an excellent run defender on the interior. You need to be 300 plus pounds to play on the interior. So even if he's 270, he's playing 270, he's 30 pounds underweight for a defensive tackle. That's usually the threshold. People don't like their centers under 300 pounds. People don't like their defensive tackles under 300 pounds. Yes, obviously you can get by with it, but for what the Giants need in their system, they need a 300-pound defensive tackle next to Dexter Lawrence that can stop the run.
Can Darius Alexander fill that spot?
He's not 300 pounds either, right?
He's a little undersized. I think he's 290.
Yeah. I know my 300 pounds. So yeah, he's not there.
Yeah, you love your 300-pound men.
You gotta just give him pizza.
But that's with Darius Alexander. He's a good pass rusher so far, so good, but he hasn't been great against the run. And long term, let's see how he performs against the run as a slightly undersized defensive tackle. That's why it's so desperate. The Giants really need to get a big 320-pound, guy over there.
That Tony Siragusa run stuffer up the middle.
Is Ashawn Robinson out there? Did he get signed?
He got signed. He got a lot of money too. He got a 1-year, $10 million deal.
Yeah, it's kind of what I think that's kind of what we thought he would get, but somewhere in there. Michael says, thank you, buddy. He says, think Denver traded too much today.
I don't think they did.
I don't either. Reason being is they're close to winning a Super Bowl. And that guy puts you over the top. Nobody's going to give a damn about the 30th overall pick. You're not going to get a wide receiver as good as Jalen Waddle with the picks they gave up. So I don't think Denver gave up too much. If they were in a situation like we are, where Anthony mentioned it'd be a big cap hit, and we don't have a day 2 pick. Maybe Denver situation. I think Denver did just fine.
Yeah, I think it's one of those trades where you look at it and you say both teams did really well. And I think Denver, if you had him, there's a team that's a Super Bowl contender. Like Jalen Waddle's the type of piece that could turn you from a Super Bowl contender to a Super Bowl favorite. So, I think they're in a spot, like you said, Bad Dog, where you want to make that extra move to put yourself over the top. And I think that's the type of move that could potentially
when you can go for it, you go for it. When you're that close, you can take those chances.
Yeah.
Like the Eagles giving Barkley all that money. That was a big chance he took because Barkley did not have a good year in 2023, and they believed in him. And let's be honest, I don't think Barkley played very hard for us in 2023. I think he admittedly said so, and it worked out for them. We couldn't afford to give Barkley $45 million. They could, and it worked out for them. So we got to get in the situation where one player puts you over the top. Waddle could be that guy for Denver. So,
and I see Fabian say Super Bowl Denver season was a fluke. I wasn't the highest person on Denver going into the year, but that defense is legit. Sean Payton's a great coach, and I got to give Bo Nix his flowers. In that specific system, he plays really well. And you had a guy like Jalen Waddle, and the fact that Kansas City, it looks like they're going to be weak this year, with the fact that Pat Mahomes is probably going to miss half the season, or we'll see how that works out. I think it's a year where you try to jump on it.
The Raiders are going nowhere.
Yeah, I think it's a year where you try to take a chance here if you're Denver and try to win a championship.
Jason, thank you. Says we're sitting pretty at 5. Sitting pretty at 5. Lots of good options as well as can trade down. Love is intriguing because he's another weapon for Dart. Scat and Tyrone Tracy will get carries.
Yeah, and I think.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I think a signal from what Harbaugh is trying to run in that backfield came from the interest in Kenneth Walker, because a lot of people said, why would you sign Kenneth Walker? He's not a bell cow guy. He's never been a bell cow guy. It's exactly right. Giants didn't want him to be. He's really good at playing complementary football with another running back in the backfield. They weren't trying to sign a workhorse bell cow back. They want to sign a guy who can be your primary back and still give playing time to Cam Scatterboo, Tyrone Tracy, or a combination of both of them. So I think that it would be a backfield committee with an elite front running talent in that committee.
Yeah. Scatterboo would obviously get less work, but he'd still be involved. Yes.
Scatterboo would be your goal line guy. I have no question, especially with Pancake Pat back there.
Like Bijan Robinson, or Bijan, I think he corrected everybody. It's Bijan Robinson. He does everything. He gets all the carries from
Tyler Algier
to the 10.
Right.
And then Tyler Algier goes
or Jalen Hurts when it comes to Saquon Barkley with the tush push.
Exactly.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Jason, thank you. He says our offensive line is still underrated. 5th in rushing was impressive. We held our own against some tough pass rush teams. GVR and draft O-line. It's the best line we've had in years. So I'm not mad about them running it back. I really would like them to strengthen it though. It was good, but it still could use some improvement. And I do think they will attack it in the draft at some point. I don't think it'll be in the first 2 days, but I do think they will at some point.
I think it could be in the first 2 days, but we'll see. But I have no issues at all with running it back. As we've said on the show several times, the most important thing on an offensive line is continuity. Bringing the same guys back that are familiar with one another. Obviously, GVR is not going to be here much longer if he's back this year, but having those guys, I think what they need to do is what we discussed. You have to draft a guard in this year's draft that could be a guy that you hope could be the long-term answer there, that you sit under GVR at least to start the year, and then in an ideal scenario, potentially becomes the starter by year's end or is the starter going into the following year. So they certainly need to address the offensive line. I'm a big proponent of addressing the offensive line in every draft, but they need to address the offensive line in this year's draft for sure. But I'm not necessarily against what they did with the offensive line in terms of the starters going into the year. I'm completely fine with them running it back.
I think the Illuminar one was the big one. I think we had to. We could not go in without a right tackle. We couldn't go in with Bo as our starting right tackle. Like that could not happen.
No.
So Illuminar for $13 million a year was a bargain.
And it also gave you a lot more flexibility at the top of this draft. In my opinion, had they not signed Illuminar, they were likely going to have to take a tackle with that pick. Yeah.
And that would have been tough for them because I don't love the tackles at the top of this draft. I think you can make the case for either Spencer Fano or Maui Noga moving inside to guard. And so getting Illuminor was so crucial. But speaking of guard, if they do trade down, we talked so much about trading down earlier. that Vega Ioane, I think that's how you say his name, out of Penn State.
Yeah.
That'd be the target if you trade down for sure.
I agree with you.
I've heard that too.
But he's a left guard, so you're probably flipping Runyon over to right guard. And Runyon's played right guard a full season as a starter before, so it's not a big deal.
I would love that. If they could trade, I just don't know if there's going to be a partner where they could trade in that range of the first round. But if they could do that, yeah, I think that's great. I think you fill a need and you get a long-term answer at the guard spot. So I would love if the Giants could.
And I'm sure Harbaugh would love to do that because, again, you're protecting your young quarterback, which is what you really need to do. Those big 300-pound men that Chris dreams about, that's what also Jackson Dart dreams about. I mean, these quarterbacks want these big guys in front of them to protect them. You got to protect that Ferrari. You got to get insurance for that Ferrari, man, because if you don't have insurance for that, it's, it ain't good. But that's Daniel Jones. Not that Daniel Jones is as good as Jackson Dart, but look how much better he played in Indy with a good line in front of him. So, Yeah. Kevin, thank you. He said, would you oppose a trade out of 5 and use available resources to secure a loan and bring on early with our first 2 picks? O-line is solid for years.
Exactly what I was saying. I don't know if I would go guard back-to-back rounds, but Ioane, I would totally like. I mean, I think if you trade down, let's say my theory is true. Let's say that the Cincinnati Bengals are willing to move on from their 2027 first-round pick to move up to 5 and take, we'll call it Arvell Reese if he somehow is on the board there. So you move down 5 spots. Now you take Vega Ioane with that 10th overall pick because he's projected to go maybe closer to 20. So you reach on him at that point because whatever, you already extracted all that extra value from moving down. And then in the second round, I don't think you necessarily go guard again. I think that's where defensive tackle is going to be the sweet spot. So you're going trenches. But defensive tackles are going to be on the board at number 37. So could you imagine walking out of the draft like that? You got a starter for the next several years, hopefully a decade at the guard spot in Vega. And then in the second round, you've got a new starter, at least 300 pounds. You get another 300-pound man.
Yeah, 2 draft picks
to start at the defensive tackle spot. And then you go into 2027. Hopefully you're not picking top 10 again, but maybe you are from that extra first-round pick that you got, or at least you got 2 mid-10s picks or 20, whatever. I mean,
maybe
that's
Cincinnati sucks.
One move.
Maybe Cincinnati sucks, and
that's kind of what I was hoping at or hinting at because I think there's a sneaky chance they could suck.
Right. Yeah, they lost Trey Hendrickson. Burrow's been injured, and you just you never know.
Burrow's not happy there.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
SPP Williams. Happy Collective Day. If the draft goes Reese down Styles, who does Harbaugh pick? Love. Probably. Unless he trades back.
You saying those guys are off the board, you mean?
Yeah, it'd be Mendoza, Reese, down Styles.
If you're asking me what I predict they would do, what I said earlier. I think if Jeremiah Love's there at 5 and there's not a great trade down scenario, which there could be, but if there's not, I think they would.
In that scenario, David Bailey and Ruben Bain are on the board, so it's probably you're either taking Jeremiah Love or you're trading down because the team wants that pass rusher.
Or if you think Ruben, and I know we know this, but it's a premium position. If you think Ruben Bain is an elite talent, is it crazy to say that they could?
Then you'd definitely be trading Thibodeau. You'd definitely be trading Thibodeau. Then he'd be gone.
Yeah, well, you could trade Thibodeau. Yeah.
So,
David Bailey's the one that people think is probably going to go top. He's ahead of Ruben Bain in the most recent mocks and rankings. But David Bailey, people compare him to Brian Burns. They say that's his pro comp is Brian Burns. If somebody thinks they're getting Brian Burns out of David Bailey, I think they'll sacrifice a future first round pick to move up and take that pick from the Giants.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you. He says calling Love the next Jahmyr Gibbs, and Gibbs is a top.
I think that's a good comp. I think he's a very good receiver, Jeremiah Love. I think that's a good comp in terms of skill set. I could see that.
Gibbs went first round though.
Yeah, Gibbs went first round. Yeah,
this says top second round, but Gibbs went in the first round. So
Gibbs went like 12th, didn't he?
Yeah, 12. They traded up for him, didn't they?
Yeah. They took him in the mid first. Yeah. But I misread it. I thought he was comparing the two as prospects. I think that's a good comp for him, though. I think his skill set is similar.
Is he as fast?
He's pretty fast. Yeah, Jeremiah.
What did he run? 4.36?
Yeah,
4.36.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
he's a tremendous
fast for a guy his size to run 4.36 is like absurd because he's not a small running back. He's pretty big.
Yeah.
So maybe you never know. I mean, Harbaugh like Derrick Henry. So
yeah,
Derrick Henry's the biggest running back I think I've ever seen, and he can fly. He's a anomaly.
Derrick Henry's so weird. Whenever I watch him play, like
Peterson was another one. AP was, I don't know if he's as big as Henry, but Peterson was 6'2", 210 or whatever, and he was jacked. But he could. That's the whole reason I'm a Sooner fan.
When Henry breaks those big runs, he looks like he's like running in like cement for the first 5 or 6 yards, and then all of a sudden it's like
nobody can catch him.
Yeah, he's running like a 4.5 40. It's crazy how those big runs that Derrick Henry breaks.
Yeah.
Actually, let me just follow up on the speed of Jeremiah Love compared to Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs ran 4.36 at 5'9", 199 pounds. Jeremiah Love ran the same thing at 212 pounds and 6'1". So it's pretty absurd.
And Love is tremendous receiver, much like Jahmyr Gibbs. So he's not.
That is a good comp then. I mean, exactly 40 time.
Yeah.
If he's there at 5, I could definitely see him doing it.
It's not one of those. I think a lot of Giants fans will flip out because running back Barkley. I will not. I because of what I've stated. I don't think it's an off the wall pick if they elect to do that.
Right. No. Ice Man. Thank you, buddy. He says, I don't really know what the rest of the NFC East has done. Do you believe the Giants have closed the gaps between the teams?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what the comment means. If your comment means, do I think they've completely closed the gap and they're the favorites going into
they've gotten closer, probably.
I can't say that. But the fact that you added Harbaugh, Dart coming into year 2, I like what they did in the offseason. Harbaugh alone, I think, closes the gap tremendously. We're going to be competitive within this division, no doubt about it, next year.
I don't know what Washington is. I never do. I don't think Dallas is going to be very good. I think the Eagles are still probably the best team in this division, but I don't think they're as dominant as they've been. They lost a lot of guys on defense. Then, of course, Eagle content creators are sitting there, yanking their crank about Hollywood Brown. Oh, you got a playmaker. Hollywood Brown fly. Hollywood Brown is older now. You don't run like he did when he came out of Oklahoma, man. He's not the same receiver. It's just those guys. I don't know what the hell's the matter with them.
To be fair, we all got excited about Darnell Mooney too, and he's 20.
Well, no, I didn't make a video saying we got our next huge playmaker over here because we signed Darnell Mooney. I mean,
fair enough.
They act like this guy is freaking Jerry Rice. That they just that's what they do with every player. Because I don't either they're just they eat horse shit or they don't know football. It's amazing. I always say I want to see the Eagles suck because I want to see what those content. Let them be bad for 3 years, and I guarantee half the content creators on this platform will be gone. I guarantee it. And they can't do anything else. Let them be bad for years to come. They will not be around. Cruzon, thank you. He says D'Angelo Pounds with the 37 pick. He's only 5'9", but he's sticking in coverage. I really want a cornerback in the first or second round. I'm going
to be honest, Cruzon. I don't know enough about him. I will look into him as the draft gets closer, but I don't know enough about him. But what I will say is corner is definitely a massive need for the Giants long term. There's no doubt about it. We don't have a long term answer right now on this roster at that position. So it's definitely a need for sure. And I think a lot of Giants fans would be happy if we took a corner early in this year's draft.
Yeah. I think D'Angelo Pounds is awesome. I love him. He's a really exciting prospect. Now, a lot of people label him a nickel cornerback. They say he's going to play in the slot because he's 5'9". He's not played in the slot. I hate when people do this. It's what the Giants did with Cordell Flott. He was a little skinny, so they shoved him into the slot, and he wasn't good there. Same thing with Darnay Holmes. Those guys are outside cornerbacks. That's where they're comfortable. That's where they should play. So that kind of puts D'Angelo Pounds in this boom or bust. Is the team going to play him on the outside, and is he going to succeed there? Or are they going to be right? His size doesn't work, and then he moves inside, and then he's not comfortable inside. But he's a really good player. He's in that Indiana defense, really good nose for the football. D'Angelo Pounds would probably be worth the 37th overall pick. Well, I don't know if he's worth 37.
We also know that the Giants,
contention for it,
based on free agency, are not opposed to taking undersized corners. So
yes,
undersized members of the secondary. So yeah,
true.
Sam, thank you, buddy. He says, hi, guys. I'm confused. Chris, if Styles and Love are there at 5, you pick Love. No, he wants
who I would pick. No, I would pick Styles. That's my desired pick for the Giants. As I said a couple of minutes ago, I'm just saying if Love is there at 5, if Love's there at 5, I'm assuming Styles isn't.
Correct. I agree.
Anthony said, I think Styles goes to Tennessee at 4. If they were both there, I'd probably lean that the Giants would go Styles. I doubt both will be there. And I think if Love is there, Styles will not be, which is why I'm leaning if Love is available at 5, I think the Giants will end up taking
Harbaugh likes his middle
if they don't trade down.
I know. I mean, it was at the end of the draft, but I remember them taking Patrick Queen that 1 year, and he ended up being a pretty good linebacker for them. So Harbaugh wants a captain of defense, and Sonny Styles definitely could be that. We haven't had a really good, like a dominating. We've had average to above average middle linebackers. You know, we brought him in, like you said, Blake Martinez, Bobby O'Kerry. They had decent years.
Come on,
right? They had decent, but we haven't really had a playmaker at that position. God, I don't even remember since Jesse Armstead, maybe.
Pierce was a
Antonio Pierce, right? So it's been a long since our Super Bowl years.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to have.
Even Baddog was only for a handful of years, right. Where he was.
It'd be nice to have a playmaker at the second level.
Yeah.
Of the defense. You know, it's just been a very weak. It's been a very weak spot for this team, and he would strengthen it really fast. Michael, thank you. Says everyone was killing Detroit for trading up for Gibbs. I know I was. I was like, why? Because they had just picked up a running back like the year before with Montgomery. I think it was Montgomery. And I'm like, why would you? What are they doing? But they know better than me. That's what I say.
I think this is great to bring up, though, because everybody did kill Detroit for trading up for Gibbs and for taking a linebacker in the second round. Both of those guys are foundational linchpin pieces, elite players at their position. So if you're going to make the argument for John Harbaugh to say, fuck positional value and just take BPA, you're going to look at what Detroit did, and you're going to use that as the argument because those are two all-pro level talents that they secured because they were falling down the board because nobody wanted to take them because of positional value. So that's a great example to bring up.
And in my opinion, the biggest argument, if you want to argue love to the Giants, is what we talk about all the time. The way to capitalize on winning a Super Bowl in today's NFL with what quarterbacks make is to try to win when they're on that rookie quarterback salary. And if you feel Jeremiah Love is the player that enhances your offense for the next 2 or 3 years better than any other player in this draft that you could potentially take, which you clearly do if you're taking him that early, that's the argument, because you feel like you could capitalize on that 3 or 4 year window when you have Jackson Dart still on that rookie salary. That and a strong run game, as we saw with Eli Manning with Tiki Barber early on in his career, helps out that young quarterback a lot.
Mark, thank you. He says downs at 5 would be disappointing. Just imagine gone if we didn't get the last 2 meaningless games. Would you be happy if we went 7-10? I mean, I wouldn't be happy. I'm not going to be happy unless they're in the playoffs, but I wouldn't be upset. It'd be nice to see us going in the right direction, especially if we can beat the Eagles. I mean, we kicked their ass last year. We beat Dallas this year. It'd be nice to beat some of these better teams. Again, I'm not going in the year going, God, I want to be 7-10. But if that's what they finished and you're improving and you could see the team is getting better, I can live with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the method of the 7-10. Is it a 7-10 where we're relatively uncompetitive for the first half of the year and then we win some meaningless games late in the year? Or is it a 7-10 where we stick with some of the best teams in the NFL and we play relatively well from within the division? So I think there's context that comes into it. I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to be happy regardless if they go 7-10, if I'm being honest. But right. I think there's different levels to it. There's a good 7-10. Well, there's not a good 7-10, but there's a much better version of a 7-10, than another potential scenario. So it depends on the context for me, whether or not I'd be extremely disappointed with the 7-10 season. But I think when you add John Harbaugh, I think the goal has to be that you're competing to make the playoffs. I think that has to be the goal. We have to set the standard. My argument is if you had Harbaugh on this team last year, I think they win at least 3 or 4 more games, which put you at 7 or 8 wins last year. So if I think they're going to have a better roster this year, why can't this team win 9 or 10 games in a division where I feel like the Cowboys
with a weaker schedule too? Schedule.
The Cowboys could potentially be taking a step back. The Eagles could potentially be taking a step back. There's vulnerabilities within the division. I think we could compete. I'm not saying we're going to win a Super Bowl. I'm not even necessarily saying we're definitely making the playoffs, but I expect this team to be in the thick of it and playing very meaningful football late into the season.
I hope so. But that said, I got to get out of here because I got to get ready to call this WBC championship because I've been covering all the games. I gotta hammer out.
USA going to win tonight or what?
Yes. Even though Nolan McLean's pitching, and I don't like that at all. But it is.
I don't either. I'm a Met fan. I don't want him to get hurt.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. But we had to use Skeens to get by the Dominican Republic. So I mean, we'll see how it goes. The United States gonna have to put up some runs tonight. Anyway, that brings us to the close of another edition of Giants Collective. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. Happy St. Patty's Day to everybody. If you haven't done so, if you could hit the thumbs up, it helps us out. Don't forget to subscribe. We're closing on 7,500 subscribers, which is awesome. You can check us out on Instagram, TikTok. Check us out on Twitter at GiantsHMA, and wherever you get your podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon, and, of course, Apple. If you could leave a 5-star review on Apple, that also helps us out. So, for Chris next to me, Anthony on, I guess it's your far right if you're looking at the screen, and the Bad Diggy Dizzle. We will see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your St. Patrick's Day. See you Thursday. We out. Peace.
Have a good night,
Go
guys.
Giants. Go Giants.